The WHO's pandemic agreement, which was quote-unquote adopted in May of 2025, cannot be signed by any of the member nations until after the negotiations to create the Pathogen Access and Benefit Sharing System have been completed. The completion of these negotiations is scheduled to be presented to the World Health Assembly in May of 2026. While the PABS system is touted as a way of providing low-income nations with equitable access to pandemic-related products, in reality, the World Health Organization seeks to control, manipulate, and profit from the discovery, creation, research, development, manufacturing, regulation, distribution, and administration of biological weapons-grade pathogens with pandemic potential. PABS is actually the new OPEC cartel, the Organization of Pandemic Emergency Corporations. A cartel is defined as an organization created between a group of producers to regulate supply and manipulate prices. A cartel is also defined as a partnership between two or more companies whose goal is to manipulate the market and or the cost of goods to their advantage. A cartel is a group of independent corporations, manufacturers, suppliers, or other entities that join together to restrict competition, fix prices, rig bids, control or allocate markets by stockpiling and marketing quotas, or conduct other similar illegal activities. Collusion occurs when entities or individuals work together to influence a market or pricing to their advantage. Acts of collusion can include price fixing and or sharing insider information. The following are excerpts from the initial text proposals submitted by many nations. The original documents are available at nopabs.com. Under the category of limiting access to materials and information, the African group submitted text so that access to PABS materials and sequence information shall be subject to terms and conditions defined in a contract between the recipient and the WHO. Brazil submitted that sharing of sequence information occurs via a World Health Organization managed database. Malaysia submitted text that the World Health Organization collaborating centers and designated national reference laboratories within a WHO coordinated laboratory network for sharing PABS material and sequence information shall serve as the primary hubs for the receipt, storage, and redistribution of such materials. Malaysia also submitted that sequence information shall be deposited, managed, and disseminated exclusively through a WHO database. PABS sequence information shall only be deposited in and accessed through WHO databases. South Africa submitted that execution of the World Health Organization Laboratory Standard Material Transfer Agreement is a precondition to access. South Africa also submitted that all prospective recipients, persons and entities, seeking access to PABS materials, including for research and or for development, manufacture, authorization, or supply of vaccines, therapeutics, and diagnostics, shall execute a WHO Standard Material Transfer Agreement approved by the Conference of the Parties as a precondition to access. There will be no access without obligations. There are many questions about the restriction of access to PABS materials and sequence information. Will independent corporations and organizations from countries that are not party to the pandemic agreement be prohibited from accessing vital information regarding emerging pathogens? Will bureaucratic delays and the need to sign standard material transfer agreements slow down the response time during emergencies? Will exclusive agreements restrict innovation by limiting access to important information to a select group of accepted laboratories within the WHO Coordinated Laboratory Network? These questions must be answered. In order for nations, laboratories, organizations, researchers, and manufacturers to access pathogen materials and genetic sequence information, they have to be willing to pay to play. Article 12 of the Pandemic Agreement states very clearly, each participating manufacturer shall make available to the World Health Organization, pursuant to legally binding contracts signed with the World Health Organization, rapid access targeting 20% of their real-time production of safe, quality, and effective vaccines, therapeutics, and diagnostics for the pathogen causing the pandemic emergency, provided that a minimum threshold of 10% of their real-time production is made available to the World Health Organization as a donation, and the remaining percentage, with flexibility based on the nature and capacity of each participating manufacturer, is reserved at affordable prices to the World Health Organization. Brazil has submitted text that users must report their analysis and publications to the World Health Organization and agree to terms ensuring compliance and benefit sharing, including contributions from revenue. Brazil also submitted that when revenue arises from commercialization of products, which were developed thanks to the sharing or utilization of materials or sequence information, participating manufacturers shall contribute a percentage of the income to benefit sharing. The Central African Republic submitted that to ensure sufficient production during an emergency, manufacturers using PABS materials and sequences must grant manufacturing licenses to the World Health Organization, which can then sub-license them to manufacturers in developing countries. The Central African Republic also submitted that a fundamental element of the PABS system is that the benefit sharing must ensure equitable and guaranteed access to vaccines, therapeutics, and diagnostics from the initial stages of outbreaks to prevent their development into public health emergency of international concern, and during fakes to prevent pandemics. This guarantee should be materialized in the form of mandatory stockpiles for developing countries. The Central African Republic also submitted text that this commitment should be applicable not only during emergency periods, but also during non-emergency periods, to build up World Health Organization stockpiles and allow rapid access in the event of outbreaks with pandemic potential. Malaysia submitted text stating that benefits arising from the use of PABS materials and sequence information shall be shared without undue delay. At all times, regular building and management of national, regional, or international stockpiles and support for strengthening health systems, laboratory capacity, and research and development infrastructure and manufacturing readiness, particularly in developing countries. Malaysia also submitted that monetary contributions to the PABS fund shall be made by recipients of PABS materials and sequence information engaged in generating revenue from the direct and indirect use of PABS materials and sequence information, including laboratories, institutions, researchers, developers, and manufacturers of vaccines, therapeutics, and diagnostics. Malaysia also submitted that annual monetary contribution is based on the revenue generated from the commercialization of products and services, directly or indirectly from using the PABS system. South Africa submitted text that all recipients of PABS materials and or pathogen sequence information that generate revenue, directly or indirectly, from PABS-enabled products or services shall contribute annual monetary benefit sharing to the PABS Equity Fund. South Africa also submitted that the distribution and use of monetary and non-monetary benefits shall occur under Conference of the Parties direction, administered by the World Health Organization Secretariat. Tunisia submitted text that any country that has contributed to the PABS system by sharing biological resources or genetic data has the right to receive a guaranteed minimum quota of products developed from these resources. Tunisia also submitted text that any manufacturer that has accessed pathogens must commit to returning a portion of the products developed or profits to the country of origin. All of this is to be overseen by a bloated bureaucracy with the World Health Organization at the core of control. Article 12 of the Pandemic Agreement states that the Conference of the Parties to the World Health Organization Pandemic Agreement shall establish a dedicated PABS Secretariat which shall be responsible for managing and maintaining global registries of PABS materials and sequence information. The African group submitted text that the administration and coordination of the PABS system shall be undertaken by the World Health Organization under the guidance of the Conference of the Parties. Brazil submitted text stating that the WHO Coordinated Laboratory Network is an international network of authorized laboratories managed by the World Health Organization. The Central African Republic submitted text that the World Health Organization shall coordinate and administer the PABS system under the supervision of the Conference of Parties. Malaysia submitted text that the World Health Organization shall determine allocation and distribution of vaccines, therapeutics, and diagnostics under the guidance of the Conference of the Parties, including through the Global Supply Chain and Logistics Network. Malaysia also submitted text that the World Health Organization shall be responsible for managing and maintaining global registries of PABS materials and sequence information, and coordinating the collection, allocation, and disbursement of monetary and non-monetary benefit-sharing contributions. Malaysia also submitted that the World Health Organization shall record and monitor all accesses, transfers, and uses of PABS materials and sequence information, tracking each item from its source through to final use and disposition. Malaysia also submitted that the Conference of the Parties to the World Health Organization Pandemic Agreement shall establish a dedicated PABS Secretariat, which shall be responsible for managing and maintaining global registries of PABS materials and sequence information, and coordinating the collection, allocation, and disbursement of monetary and non-monetary benefit-sharing contributions. Malaysia also submitted text that the day-to-day operations of the PABS system shall be coordinated and administered by the World Health Organization, including conducted through WHO-designated laboratories comprising national and regional reference laboratories responsible for the receipt, handling, and redistribution of PABS materials. WHO global databases for the secure storage and dissemination of PABS sequence information, and distribution centers responsible for the storage and delivery of stockpiled or donated vaccines, therapeutics, and diagnostics. South Africa submitted text that the World Health Organization Secretariat acts as the PABS Secretariat. South Africa also submitted that the WHO PABS Sequence Information Repository shall ensure that the PSI generated from PABS materials is shared through a single WHO-designated point of first deposition, rather than at the discretion of individual repositories or databases. South Africa also submitted text that compliance of the World Health Organization lab network with the standard materials transfer agreements shall be monitored by the Director General. And finally, Tunisia submitted text that the parties recognize the World Health Organization as the central coordinating authority of the PABS system, responsible for its operational management, monitoring, strategic oversight, and support to the parties. The proposed PABS system would concentrate all of the world's most deadly pathogens into the hands of unelected, unaccountable bureaucrats. The diagnostics, devices, drugs, vaccines, and gene-altering therapies that they believe to be the way to prevent, prepare for, and respond to the next pandemic have actually caused the current pandemic of vaccine-acquired immune deficiency syndrome, or VAIDS, myocarditis, stroke, turbo cancer, and sudden death. These negotiations are not designed to prevent, prepare for, or respond to the next pandemic. The PABS negotiations are designed to incentivize the search for deadly pathogens so that pathogens with pandemic profiteering potential can be circulated through the WHO coordinated laboratory network, not for the benefit of mankind, but for the benefit of those who would profit from the diseases that they would spread through the very system that they are claiming would prevent the next pandemic. These PABS negotiations must be stopped immediately.